Good morning. Good morning. We're going to get started here. Those of you, you might want to turn your chairs around so you can face this way. That's after you say hello, good morning to the person sitting next to you. I want to welcome you all to the Church of the Open Door and to Family Issues Roundtable's Heroin Awareness Program. I know you could be someplace else today. It's Friday. We could all think of places we want to be. But we all know that this is an important topic, so we're here. And I thank you. And if you look across the room, there's a lot of people here today. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out for your day. We have some excellent presenters that are going to be talking to you in just a few minutes. So we want you to enjoy the program, but we also want you to take something away. So thank you for being here again. Just a couple things. If you're not aware of the bathrooms are out the door, and to the right, there are some small ones, like single bathrooms. And then further down the hallway, past the elevators, yes, they even have elevators here. On the left side, there are bigger bathrooms. And think of this building, last time I was here at Church Open Door, this building wasn't even here. So we just want to acknowledge Bill. Where's Bill at? Pastor Bill, where are you at? Is he here? Getting the air, go put the air on. But Bill Galanto sits on our board, Families Issues Roundtable, one of our newer members, and he provided this building, and it doesn't cost us anything, so we want to thank him and the staff and the members here from Church of Open Door. If you're familiar with Families Issues Roundtables, we've been providing programs for years, and whenever you came before, we had to charge you a fee. But sometime last year, when the government was having issues with their budgets, we knew many of the agencies that we dealt with, nonprofit agencies, were having problems making their budget. Matter of fact, there were some of the people who sat on our board who were going to work and they weren't even getting paid. So at that point, the board decided that we still need to continue to provide education to our agencies, nonprofit agencies, and as well as families and members in the community. So we came up with ways to provide training that doesn't cost, and this is one of them. So we thank you for coming, and we thank Church Open Door for providing this building too. So if we could, just give them a hand, please. I appreciate that. This is a large crowd, and again, if you're here and you brought your cell phone like I did, I appreciate if you would put it on mute or turn it off, or it becomes mine. And it's hard to get it out of our evidence area, so. Again, a little bit about Families Issues Roundtable. We are members from agencies just like the ones that are here at your agencies, just like members from the church that you attend, just people who are interested in the community, and our goal is to provide education for families, provide professional development, and just overall awareness of issues that affect everyone around us. So we are looking for new members. If you're interested or you want some more information, please see Ann Mushinwa. She is standing at the door right there. She is our chair. Make sure you go out and meet her. Tell her you enjoyed being here today. Also on your tables, there are some evaluations. Before you leave, please take the time to fill those out. And if you could just leave it on the table out where you registered to come in. We appreciate that. Your opinions are important to us, programs that we should add, and things that we should take away. So take the time to fill those out. Some other events that we have coming up, out there on the table is a flyer about a program we're going to put on, and that is the one-day Citizen Police Academy. Has anyone ever been part of the New York City Police Citizen Police Academy? Other than my staff right back there, one hand, that's terrible. I'm not going to say a lot about it, but we are going to do something new. This is usually a 6-week, 2 times a week kind of a program. We're going to jam it into one day out at County Control and that's going to be May 20th. You're going to get an inside look at what York City Police does, how we train our officers. It is an incredible program, and if you're interested in that, again, see Ann. And the flyers, her email address is on there. Coming up again, we're going to have part 2 of Children of Incarcerated Parents. How many people were at part 1 for that? Oh, this is terrible. We got to get you guys out more. Thank you to those that have been part of that. It is a very good program. We held it over at the hotel last time. It deals with children of their parents or their grandparents are probably watching them because their parents are in jail, and the whole trauma that surrounds that, and how they grow up, and the issues that they encounter as they grow up. So again, that's an excellent program. We'll have more information about that. So if you want to attend that, there's a registration for that. Please just fill out the registration. You can do it online, and then we'll add you to the list, and we look forward to seeing you again on those days. If I was to ask the question, they're going to turn the air conditioner. They're going to give you a little more air. So, I got vest on here, so you have to excuse me here. If I was to ask the question, how many people have had this heroin has affected you? Yourself, your family, your co-workers, your neighbors, your friends, or even any kind of substance abuse? How many people would raise their hand and just say yes? That's a lot of people. Also, I was just in prepared, I was talking with some people who even work with their clients who are involved in this or have issues with that. It's an epidemic in the state of Pennsylvania. And right here in this region, Cumberland County, Perry County, Dauphin County, York County, we have one of the highest overdose problems in the state or even in the United States. This is a serious problem. The DEA, in their report, states that 1.2 people in the total population have tried heroin at least once in their lifetime. And the numbers are staggering. This problem is real. Our goal today is to bring about awareness, some education, and to have a discussion on this heroin problem. Again, you're going to hear from some people who are dealing with it through their particular backgrounds. You hear people from the coroner's office, the district attorney's office, from the heroin task force, as well as York City Police's narcotics shooting. Sit back, relax, take good notes, form questions, and then when it's time to engage, ask them questions. Ask them the tough questions. We want you to go out here not with the answers to all your solutions to it, but to have some kind of additional tools to help you do your jobs just a little bit better, to help you deal with people that are in your life that are affected by this addiction. I'm going to introduce them to you in just a second, but I would like just to recognize the members of the Families Issues Roundtable. If you're a member of that board, would you just please stand, or the folks out at the table, could you guys stick your head in? Y'all just stand for me real quick. Come in, wave, say hi, okay? Where's the rest of them? Thank you, guys. In order that they will be meeting with you today, I just want to introduce you and tell you a little bit about them. Mrs. Charlene Scaretta, she's a member of the Heroin Task Force. She's a member of the Parents Panel Advisory Council, Resilient Voices, and she's a big advocate for education and legislation in the war on drugs. After her son, Danny, died from a heroin overdose, she founded Danny's Story. Have anybody seen that video? It's online, it's on the website, but also we have Ms. Shar here to talk to us about it, so in the person. So we thank her for being here. She's married and a mother of 2 children. Also is Miss Pam Gay. She's a registered nurse for more than 34 years. She's certified in forensic nursing. In 2014, Ms. Gay was sworn in the Office of County Coroner. She is also certified diplomat with the American Board of Meteorological Death Investigators. She focused her energies on survivors of lost souls and educating the community regarding health trends in York County. She's been married to her husband, Jeff, for 33 years. She has 2 grown children and 2 grandchildren. And like most of us, she enjoys spending her time with her family. Clyde Stabley, he was a York City police officer for 23 years. He retired as the rank of lieutenant. While he was a police officer, he graduated with a degree in nursing from York College and is now a registered nurse, and he's been so since 1994. He began his career in the coroner's office part-time in 1998 and joined the staff full-time in 2001. He is also certified as diplomat, American Board of Meteorological Death Investigators. Smoke, as I like to call him, is married. His wife, Deb, for 39 years. They have 2 adult children, 4 grandchildren. And in his spare time, he likes to read, travel, and doing work. Just a side note, he was one of my bosses when he was on the job. Very good man. Really serious about what he does. Very serious. From the District Attorney's Office, Attorney Dave Sunday. He served 4 years in the Navy, including a tour of Persian Gulf during Operation Desert Strike. He received his undergraduate in finance from Penn State University in 2002. He graduated from Widener Law School in 2007. Mr. Sunday worked as a law clerk for the Honorable Joseph C. Adams in York County Court. In 2009, he joined the York County District Attorney's Office as a deputy prosecutor. And he currently serves as the DA's Chief of Litigation, overseeing prosecutions of major crimes, felonies, drug cases. In February of 2013, Dave Sunday was appointed to the United States Department of Justice as a Special Assistant to the United States Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Pennsylvania. In that capacity, he prosecutes gangs, guns, drug cases in federal court as warranted. He is married and lives in Dillsburg. Final member of the panel is Detective First Class Andrew Schaefer. And I think Andy's sitting in the back there. Andy's been a police officer for more than 20 years. Majority of his career he has spent investigating narcotics investigations. He's a supervisor of the York City's narcotic unit for 9 years. He personally made over 800 illegal narcotics drug arrests. He's involved in over 3,000 illegal narcotics arrests. Personally made over 200 undercover transactions. He has planned and participated in over 700 narcotic search warrants. He's involved in over 1,000 cases using confidential sources. Worked narcotic cases with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Office, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearm, U.S. Immigrations and U.S. Customs Service, and the Drug Enforcement Agency. He's taught at numerous colleges, high schools, churches, civic groups, and our Citizen Police Academy. On a daily basis, he interviews drug users and drug dealers. He's testified in court over 150 times in narcotics cases. He's testified in U.S. federal court numerous times, testified in court over 70 times as an expert in cocaine, heroin, and marijuana use and dealings. So you can see today we have 4 or 5 people here who are well-versed in the heroin issue. So I look forward to hearing what they have to say. I hope you do too. They all bring the same message, but from a different viewpoint. When it's time, we do the Q&A. We have some wireless microphones, so we want to make sure that your question is heard by everybody and that you get the answer that you want to hear. So, Ms. Shar, without further delay, thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me? No? Now? Okay. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. Uh-oh. Now it's close. Now it's real close. Okay. That's good. That's good. The story I'm going to tell you is my son's story. My hope is that it won't be just some unfortunate, sad story that you heard, that it might mean something to somebody here. It might even change you. So this is Danny's story. Someone moved my papers. Do you have one of my papers? Do you have, not that the story changes, but I want to make sure that I don't miss any points. He was unresponsive and he was gasping for his breath. He was dying right in front of them. 12 years ago, this May, I buried my son. He was only 26 years old. He made a mistake at a young age and he found himself caught in a world that a lot of people will never, ever understand. On May 13th, 2004, Danny died from an overdose of heroin. That night, he lost his battle with one of the darkest gifts ever given to this world, heroin. He became another statistic, another victim of a crime, another victim of choices. The paper said Scaretta found in his car, but I couldn't let those be the last words said about Danny, so I started telling Danny's story in churches, schools, prisons, anybody who would let me in, and then it realized that there were a lot of Dannys. We weren't the only ones, so it became a message that people had to hear. It could be waiting around the next corner for anyone. We're from Shrewsbury, and in '76, it was this tiny dot on the map. What could possibly go wrong in this little sleepy town? Well, '83 became the road for the drugs from DC and Baltimore, New York, Philadelphia, and they kind of invaded our little town, and we just never saw it coming. We never imagined Danny's first cigarette, his first taste of beer, was ever going to take him to marijuana, eventually cocaine, and then to heroin. Our lives took a turn that we just never saw coming, and we weren't prepared. And heroin, there's no boundaries. It doesn't care where you go to school. It didn't care where we worked, what church we went to. It was a club that opened its arms to Danny and anyone. Anyone is welcome to come in and get high. And one of the things with heroin is it's like this custom-made banquet just for you. Whatever you want, you think you need. And it's like a big party. But Danny didn't realize that while he was at this banquet, he actually had one foot in the grave. You're going to learn a lot of facts today, a lot of good things to take away. The one thing you must never, ever forget is that heroin kills. There's another fact, not just about heroin, but the use of drugs escalates. Danny didn't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to use heroin today. That term gateway drug is real, and each door that Danny went through was to a bigger and a better high until he opened the last one and he thought he found true love. In fact, heroin addiction is often referred to as a love affair. But what he thought loved him back, it took his last breath. The myth about heroin is that they're not all homeless, in the back alleys, uneducated, junkies, felons. Danny was none of these things. He just made a mistake at a young age, and he got caught in that spiral, and he couldn't step out. It was all about choices, that free will, you wake up with it, you go to bed with it, you can't get rid of it. You have to make choices. And every day that our children open their eyes, they're going to have to make choices and decisions, and they're not all going to be easy. Those terms, the golden calf, the false gods, they're all still here, they're just in different forms. They're distractions, especially for our children, and sometimes they're just too overwhelming, and they choose poorly. Danny was not a moral failure because of this. He knew right from wrong. He recognized good and evil. He just got caught in that spiral, and he couldn't step out of it. He tasted something very sweet, and then he just slipped away from us. The coroner on the scene when Danny was found knew that something was wrong. Danny didn't fit any kind of profile. He filed his report with the district attorney of York. An investigation began, and 6 months later, an arrest was made. Charges were filed for third-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and reckless endangerment. We were in uncharted waters, but they were willing to move forward. The district attorney's office defended my son. The young man with Danny that night, he went to prison for the choices he made. No one walked away untouched. One mother's son goes to prison and mine's gone. His mother was traumatized. It was heartbreaking in the courtroom to watch the defendant turn around in his orange jumpsuit looking for his mom in the courtroom. It broke my heart. I don't hate this boy. I hate what he did. But it's not for me to not forgive someone because there's somebody else much bigger than me that will deal with that. It's not about revenge, not about getting even. It's about being accountable for someone's life and what you do. Just because you have free will doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want to whomever, whenever. And I got to give an impact statement in that courtroom, and I told them what it meant to live without Danny. Danny told me that state of euphoria, that rush, that warm feeling going through his body, there was nothing like it. He was 26 years old, but the condition he was in that night, he couldn't reach in his own pocket and get his cell phone to call for help. He couldn't drive his own car. When he would leave the house, we would say, "Danny, be safe, come back to us." And he'd say, "It's all good, Mom. I got it under control." But what he didn't take into account was the other person with him who made the final decision whether Danny lived or died. Danny put himself in harm's way, but someone else decided whether or not Danny was going to live. When they take that last breath, that's it. They don't come back in the next rerun, the next episode. They're gone. And my eyes are blind to his face now, and my ears are deaf to the sound of his voice. And my arms are going to ache for the rest of my life to hold him. But my faith has taught me that I will see him, and I hold on to that every day and every day that I visit his grave. So there is no, give me a second to talk to him. It's gone. They're gone in a second. The silence is almost deafening. I do have a lot of hopes for the future. My hope is that Danny's face will somehow help change the face of addiction, how people look at addicts. And maybe they'll look past the disease. Maybe they'll see Danny playing t-ball or basketball, or the little girl with her ballet slippers. That's my hope, that they'll look past the disease and see the person, the little boy. We have a Senate bill that I'm hoping for some movement and some support for that. It's Senate Bill 854. If it does go through, it will change what happened to Danny. It will make it a felony of the second degree, which changes everything. So that's my hope, and maybe to have Danny's name attached to it. And again, my hope today is that somebody here will be affected by what happened to Danny and the things you're going to learn here from the wonderful people who are going to share their knowledge with you. So I thank you for listening to my son's story. Take care and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Shar. Again, my name is Claude Stabley, and that's supposed to advance, but it's not. We're going to try to get the PowerPoint up here for you. There's always a little bit of a technical problem, and I apologize for that. Oh, there we go. Yep. Okay. I won't do anything. Yep. I'm a technological idiot, so you have to bear with me. I'm Claude Stabley. I'm with the coroner's office, and I've known Shar for since 2004. Danny's case was was one of my cases with the coroner's office, and I thank her for sharing that story. I also thank everyone here for being here, for wanting to learn more about this issue, and I want to tell you right now, this is a very basic kind of presentation. We're assuming that you may or may not know some things about heroin. We don't want to offend anybody by telling you things that you do know, but that may happen. So it's not intentional. It is a heroin epidemic. As Lieutenant Fells said, this is a situation that is growing in just extraordinary bounds. And it's something that we all need to be aware of and try to take some type of action against. Okay. Very first thing, what is heroin? Most of you probably do know, but heroin is highly addictive. It is synthesized from the Asian poppy plant. The liquid milk from that is obtained, and it goes through a chemical process to turn the morphine into heroin. The chemical formulation for heroin is actually 3,6-diacetyl morphine. It's a morphine molecule with 2 acetyl molecules added. And so it is a specialized kind of drug. It was developed first legally by Bayer Pharmaceuticals, the same people that make aspirin. In 1898, they began to market heroin, and they marketed it for tuberculosis treatment and to help with morphine addiction. But unfortunately, they didn't realize that heroin was much more addictive than the morphine was. So it created a much bigger problem than just the morphine addiction itself. It did not take too long till heroin then was outlawed and became illegal. But unfortunately, by that time, there was a taste for it and a market for it, and that's what's driven everything to where we are today. Heroin enters the brain very, very quickly. It passes over that blood-brain barrier and affects the receptors in the brain. One portion of the receptors that's affected is the respiratory drive. And the way heroin kills is to cut the respiratory drive down. The person doesn't breathe correctly, and ultimately they end up dying. But initially, that high response in the first few uses is what people want to chase. It's also very addictive. It changes the pathways in the brain. It actually affects the pleasure centers, and heroin, the use of heroin becomes so critical for the person who is now abusing it that it takes over all sense of pleasure for them. It can be snorted, smoked, injected, and there's even evidence now of it being in pill form. Each manner of use delivers slightly different effects and lengths of time that it's effective. So people usually begin by snorting the heroin, either the powder form, or they'll turn it into a vapor by burning it and smoking the vapor. That vapor is the quickest way that the heroin enters the brain. It passes that blood-brain barrier almost immediately, and the high is very intense. It's not as long-lived as if somebody injects. So people start off usually snorting, smoking, then move to injecting. There's a myth among many of our younger people that not all methods of heroin are addictive, and this is wrong. Every kind of method of heroin can be addictive, and some people report an addiction developed within the first 1 to 2 uses of heroin. that they absolutely need to have that. And the problems with the addiction is with every different type of usage, no matter what it would be. Another myth is that heroin addicts are just junkies living in the city on the streets, as Shar explained, and that's not the case. There are many people who function using heroin, and we've heard stories where people get up, use heroin in the morning, go to work all day, use heroin when they leave work, use heroin before they go to bed, and then the very first thing they've got to do is be up and using heroin again in the morning. Statistics that we came across, and I don't have any way of verifying it, has been reported that our food service industry is actually one of the biggest areas where heroin use occurs and heroin abuse occurs. The estimates are that approximately 30 to 50% of people involved in the food service industry may be involved in some type of substance use such as that. Our York County heroin related deaths, we don't see the typical thought process that the city is where the problems are. In our tracking over the past couple of years, about 70% of our decedents die outside the city. Only about 30% die in the city, and we have to remember that York Hospital is in the city, so if somebody's taken to York Hospital and are pronounced dead there, that counts as a city death. Many of those cases that even do die in the city are from the rural or suburban areas of York County, and sometimes outside the county, who come into the city to purchase their heroin, sometimes use their heroin, and then are left to die on the city streets or in a city property. The average age for our decedents is usually in the 20s to 40s range, and I just read a statistic this morning that in Pennsylvania, the demographic where the death rate in heroin use that is rising the most is in white females in that 20 to 40 range. And that's something that we used to not see. It used to be predominantly a male problem, but now it's crossed over and we're seeing those issues there. In 2014, we had 5 people under the age of 20 who died. 2 of them were still in high school. In doing some of these presentations, we've talked to people as young as 9 years old who were using heroin. About 2 weeks ago, I had a heroin-related death. The young man's parents were both dead. He's now dead from probable heroin use. And when I spoke with his grandmother, he said he had substance abuse issues at 10 years old. So it's impacting very young people here in York County. The associated health risks that come on with heroin use, we have a high risk of HIV and AIDS and hepatitis C. In Indiana, I believe it was 2013 or 14, they had just an overwhelming increase in the amount of HIV amongst people that were sharing needles. It was deemed a public health hazard in the area, and they instituted emergency procedures to try to combat that. So there are other factors that go along with the heroin use that present major problems. We've actually had a family member who indicated they lost one of their family members who was now clean from using heroin but died of hepatitis C after about 2 years of being clean. So those issues remain, and the problems are very significant. Heart infections, other types of infections that from the heroin use are not uncommon at all. The tolerance that a person builds up and their addiction becomes almost incredible. We've heard stories of people who began using 1 or 2 bags of heroin and now are using as many as 20 times a day or more. And so, they have to use and continue using more and more just to try to keep from being sick at that point. The withdrawal that people go through, they report to us that it's the worst kind of flu that you can imagine, times 100. They indicate vomiting, diarrhea, joint pains, aches, everything, and it's just a horrible situation. Many of the people who use heroin or other type of opiates and opioids do so just to keep from getting sick from the withdrawal. The CDC does not recognize withdrawal as being life-threatening, but what we see are people who die while they're trying to go cold turkey because of the electrolyte imbalances that are set up. So there has to be a close monitoring of the people who are trying to withdraw from heroin and to become clean again. There's a huge economic toll on businesses. Sorry, got a little bit ahead of myself. The respiratory depression that occurs with the heroin use is the biggest factor where we see deaths occur. Again, the respiratory drive center is affected, and the body basically forgets to breathe. When the body's not breathing correctly, the fluids build up in the lungs, eventually cardiac arrest occurs, and if that breathing is not restored within a matter of 4 to 6 minutes, death does occur then. And that is what we see on the cases that I respond to. The deaths that occur, they've skyrocketed. I'll let Coroner Gay talk about our numbers, but we see deaths, and I get out to investigate deaths quite often, and the impact that it has on the immediate family is incredible. The human and economic toll from heroin use is just unbelievable. We have situations where in 2014, on July 4th, a family of 3 children found their mother and father deceased in the bathroom. These types of situations are just unbelievable. The grandparents quite often care for these children then, and we see that affecting families just such as Shar's every single day. In the past 2 years, we're working with over 130 families who have lost somebody to heroin, and the toll that they go through is unbelievable. Families quite often fall apart. The heroin use just tears at everybody. They can't get the person to get in to help. The problems that occur with the heroin use in the family are quite bad. Many times the families don't even know that their family member is using heroin. Coroner Gay has had discussions on several occasions where family members decline. They don't want to have an autopsy because there's no way that their family member could be using heroin. But yet all indications on the investigation show that that's probably what happened. And when the autopsy is completed, sure enough, we find that heroin is used. So the denial is one of the problems, and quite often, especially at the beginning, heroin use is hidden from the families. The economic toll on businesses is unbelievable. The businesses have to do drug testing. They spend a lot of money on sick time, rehab, things like that, and it affects every business. Senator Scott Wagner is part of our heroin task force, and The number he gives of estimated economic impact in Pennsylvania is in the vicinity of the $10 billion range on businesses just from heroin use. We've begun doing autopsies and prosecution, and that helps in the heroin situation. We do autopsies on every suspected heroin-related death. The district attorney prosecutes those cases where we find the person who provided the heroin. But the costs to do that are passed on to the taxpayers. You and I are paying for the cost of the prosecution, the cost of the autopsies, and so it does impact everybody. Things to look for when somebody is using heroin. The classic sign is the meiosis, or the pinpoint pupils. And literally, the pupils become so constricted that it's just a tiny little black speck in the center of the eye. That is a classic sign of the opioid or heroin use. Quite often they get the nods, and you've seen the movies or TV depict that where somebody is talking and they begin to fall asleep. When I'm talking to my grandchildren, sometimes that happens. I don't think they're using heroin. I think I'm boring them just the way I am you. You know, there's a difference there, but the nods are definitely a sign if somebody is communicating. One of the first responses that we normally hear when we talk to people about when they began to suspect some type of use is that valuables would go missing. Jewelry that was in a jewelry box. Suddenly, you know, I thought I had that pair of earrings in the jewelry box, and now they're gone. I can't find them anywhere. Money disappearing out of bank accounts. That's a very, very common practice. A heroin addict who gets caught up in the throes of addiction will usually deplete all the resources they have, then begin to take the resources that are around them. So families are affected by that. We have businesses, people are running independent businesses that begin to take all their money and profits from the businesses, or stealing from some of their clients sometimes. And that is a pretty significant indication that something could be going on. The skin lesions, when people are using heroin and they go to the injection, whether it be skin popping or whether they're injecting into a vein, they're not using clean needles. The last thing they're thinking about at that point is using a clean needle. So they'll share needles, and it sets up a possibility of having infections in the veins, infections in the skin, and you'll see those types of things that occur. And talking to some people who are in recovery, they will indicate, yeah, I knew there was a possibility of HIV, anything like that, but at that point it didn't matter. I couldn't make a good choice because I needed to not be sick. The slurred speech, it's typical to being drunk. So if somebody, one of your coworkers, and I'll use my wife, when she worked in the hospital down in Maryland, they had a unit clerk who was fine in the morning, went to the bathroom, came back, began with the nods. Her speech was very slurred, and here they found out she had gone into the bathroom and used heroin. And those types of things can happen, and you do see people with a change very, very quickly like that. The droopy, heavy appearing extremities, again, that's the type of thing that occurs when somebody is inebriated, but the heroin and the opiates and opioids are all central nervous system depressants, and they'll cut down all the responses like that. The lack of motivation, abandoning their goals. Quite often we hear people talk about students who had specific kind of interests, things that they really enjoyed, and suddenly they just stopped doing those. Or they change their friends, and they begin to distance themselves from the people that they are close to, and adopt new friends, sometimes of the unsavory variety. But those types of things that are indicators that there could be some things going on. We hear people talk quite often about somebody who we now have as a deceased person, and they'll say, you know, they had a flu going on for probably a month. They would get a little bit better, and then they'd be sick and vomiting. And in a lot of cases like that, what they may be doing is going through periods of withdrawal where they couldn't get or weren't using the drugs. They may have even been trying to get clean at that point and going through withdrawal, having those types of symptoms, and then used an overdose and unfortunately died at that point. Another report we get quite often is that the person was a known user. They used at night. Somebody checked on them before they went to bed, and they were snoring very, very loudly. A lot of times this is agonal respirations, and the person is actually dying at that point, and their family member or friend didn't realize that was what was happening. They'll quite often change their priorities. Somebody who was very, very meticulous about their appearance may end up just suddenly becoming slovenly. They don't really care what they look like anymore. Again, the biggest thing that they're focused on is the use of the narcotic so they don't get sick. And the disorientation and poor motor function. Somebody who uses repeatedly can develop neurologic kind of problems that last a lifetime then. We look for paraphernalia when we go into a scene, any death scene we go into. And one of the things that you may find or you may hear reports about from people you work with is that they found insulin type syringes, diabetic syringes, but there was nobody diabetic in the house. The people didn't have diabetic animals that they had to give shots to, and nobody can understand why there would be those syringes would be in the house. That is a telltale sign right there. If there's nobody that's diabetic, there's no reason for the syringes, and those are found in the house. That's a pretty good sign that those are going on. The burned silver spoons. Quite often we'll hear people talk about, you know, some of our spoons are missing. And then when you go and check in the basement or in the garage or in the bathroom, you find silver spoons with a burned area on the bottom. And that's a way that the person cooks their heroin to prepare for the injection. Aluminum foil, gum wrappers, that's used to smoke the heroin. The powder will be placed on it, and then it'll be heated from beneath. It'll vaporize it, and they'll inhale the vapors. They'll often use straws, very short straws. Sometimes they'll take the insides out of a pen and use that to concentrate the vapors to be able to inhale it better at that point. Shoelaces and belts, if you go to the lab to get your blood drawn, they'll put a tourniquet around your arm. The person using heroin will do the same type of thing, put a tourniquet around an extremity so they can try to raise the vein. They'll inject anywhere they can find a vein. We have people that inject in their arms, in their legs, in their necks, between their toes. We've even heard reports of people, males injecting in their penis. Anywhere that a vein is present, they will use that because, again, they have to use the narcotic to keep from getting sick. We talked about the straws with the burn marks on the end, but they'll also use those to snort the powder if they're just snorting the powder without any burning. So it could be a clean straw, but they'll quite often be in 2 to 3 inch lengths. They won't be long because they'll lose product in doing that. Heroin is mostly wrapped in a small cellophane type bag, what we notice around here, but it can come in various forms. We've had capsules, and you can order clear, plain capsules over the internet. We've had heroin packed like that. We've had heroin packed in magazine pages that were folded into pharmaceutical folds. So it can be packed in a variety of different ways, and a lot of that depends upon the dealer. This is a big business. The dealer wants people to come back and use again and again, and so they'll trademark their heroin. They'll use stamps and put stamps on it. Anything from Colt 45. We heard recently about a stamp game over. Anything at all that they'll stamp, and people recognize then that's something that they want to try to get again, because it was either provided them a good fix, or it wasn't quite up to snuff for them. The heroin quite often is cut with things, and it can be cut with anything. Most of the time it's very innocuous kind of stuff, sorbitol, mannitol, things like that. But it's also being cut with fentanyl, and it's not the fentanyl that is used at York Hospital when you go in for surgery. It's fentanyl that was manufactured in Mexico. It is even more potent than heroin and can create a lot more problems. The fentanyl that we're encountering is approximately 100 times stronger than morphine. Heroin is usually a white powder. It can be rose gray, brown. Years ago, it looked like black tar. And there are occasional situations where we do find the black tar type of heroin today, but it's mostly a powder. It really doesn't have any smell, although some people can report that they smell a vinegar odor with it. That's the acetyl groups that are added to the morphine, though most people indicate that they really can't smell anything with it. Again, the toxic ingredients that can be cut in can be the fentanyl. It can be just about anything. We've heard reports of baby powder being cut in, and any type of substance that looks like the heroin powder. Most of our decedents that we have been using other substances with the heroin. So when we do get our toxicology report back from the autopsy, it'll have the heroin present. It'll have morphine and codeine, which come from the same poppy plant, but it may have fentanyl. It may have antidepressants such as alprazolam. It may have muscle relaxers, Soma, or Flexeril in with it. A lot of them have marijuana, not all. Some have alcohol, some have cocaine. Again, it's a variety of substances that we see. The purity, when I went on the police department, was about 1% to 2%. And now we're getting reports that the purity is anywhere from 30 to 80%, and sometimes higher. And if it's mixed with the fentanyl, and sometimes we have people that we believe went to purchase heroin and got pure fentanyl, that can be deadly in one dose for somebody. Again, they don't have any way of knowing exactly what's in the substance when they buy it, and they use it thinking it was the same thing that they used the last time. It may be an entirely different substance, just like 100% pure fentanyl. They use the same amount, and it's too much for them at that point. Many of the people that we have in common findings is that they're living in sober or recovery houses or halfway house. In some of these situations, there is no health department oversight. If it's actually a licensed facility, then they do have oversight, but many of the sober homes are just that. It's a house that somebody purchases. The people agree not to use drugs, and they live together. Many of the people that run these types of situations are doing a very, very good job, but there are some people who are in it for the money because they can rent the rooms out for $100 a week, and if they buy a house and make 10 rooms, that's a pretty good profit for them to make. They don't live there. They get somebody to run the house for them. And again, I equate it to you move into an apartment and the landlord tells you you can't have a dog, and if you bring the dog in, they throw you out. If you're caught using drugs in those houses, they'll tell you you got to leave, but that's about the only ramification. A lot of our people were just released from rehab or just released from prison. They've become clean. Unfortunately, in all the talks that we've been having with people, the heroin addiction is one of the strongest addictions that there is. They get out. Some of them use the same day they get out. Some of them go clean for a while, but they'll try to use the same amount they used prior to they entering the rehab. Their body, the tolerance level has gone down, and that first dose can often be a fatal dose, and we do see that happening quite often. About 80% of the time, people that are using heroin are using with friends, and about 80% of the deaths that we have, the person was found alone. So that means those people just leave that friend, will find them positioned in what their friends think are positions that will help them recover. Sometimes they'll be laid on the floor. They may have ice placed in their groin, under their arms, things like that. They don't really help at all with the recovery, and the person dies alone. And then we have the death and have to do the investigation as to where the heroin came from. But quite often they do die alone, but they were using with other people. In a lot of our cases, in the estimation right now nationwide, about 80% of the people that are using heroin were using prescription drugs before, either legal prescription drugs or obtaining prescription drugs for recreational use. And that's one of the situations that we're seeing becoming more and more common. People that used OxyContins, Vicodins, things like that, can no longer get them, or they become very expensive, and it's cheaper to go to the use of heroin. And unfortunately, we end up seeing a lot of those cases. What we see quite often are some of the pictures here. On the right is a picture, much like Mrs. Scaretta talked about, somebody that lost a family member. On the upper left, that's a picture that is a common position in which case we find overdoses. The person, if you look very closely in the right hand, is holding the syringe yet. They collapse. If they were able to breathe, they're not in a good position to be breathing. But again, their respiratory drive is decreased, and so they basically don't stop breathing at that point, and unless that's reversed, death occurs very quickly. I talked about skin popping, and on the lower left is a picture of the scabs and the lesions that are left after somebody's skin pops. Again, it sets up little infections. They are very itchy. They scratch the scabs. It leaves scars like that. I've had cases already where those scars have been over the entire body. People injected in their backs for them, on legs, everything, and they're scarred like that. Narcan, and I'm sure everybody has heard about naloxone. It's been in the news an awful lot. Narcan is a drug that reverses the effect of opioids, and heroin in the brain. And I try to give you an example. For those of you that know anything about carbon monoxide deaths, the carbon monoxide binds with the hemoglobin. It has a greater affinity and binds with the hemoglobin better than the oxygen does, and that's what causes death. The Narcan has a greater affinity for those receptors than what the opiates do. And so if the opiate is bound to the receptors in the brain, the mu receptors, and they help to control the respiratory drive, the Narcan just bumps that narcotic off and joins that receptor and allows the body to start breathing again. If Narcan is given in the appropriate time, 4 to 6 minutes, when a person stops breathing, it can reverse that respiratory depression and the person can be allowed to breathe and can be allowed to live again. Narcan has been given in emergency rooms and hospitals for years and years and years. I've given it, and Coroner Gay has given it many, many times. It's very effective if it's given at the appropriate time. The one problem with Narcan is it's a shorter effect than what the opiates is, so the person has to be monitored to make sure that once the Narcan wears off, the opiate doesn't reattach again and create a problem. It's been estimated that 80 to 90% of the time Narcan is given, if it's given in the appropriate time, it can save lives. Last spring, last year there was a law passed in Pennsylvania that allowed police officers and first responders to carry Narcan. Prior to that, they couldn't carry it. In York County here, the district attorney's office and the Heroin Task Force worked very hard together, and the police departments began carrying Narcan in April 1st of last year. We were the second county in Pennsylvania to have every police officer carrying Narcan, and that's pretty significant because the other county had only one police department, and we've got 23. So it was pretty significant. From April 1st through the end of the year, we have 99 Narcan saves, which was almost unreal. That law also carries a portion of it. It's a Good Samaritan law that says if somebody is with a friend that is overdosing and they call and follow certain criteria, giving their name and information, staying with the person, talking to the police, and they are not involved in other type of criminal activity, they are granted certain immunities. District Attorney Sunday will be able to answer any more questions about that, the specifics about that. But we think that's pretty exciting because, again, the people who die were usually using with somebody else and then left with nobody calling county control. This year already we have over 30 saves with Narcan. And the good thing about it is the Narcan cannot be abused. If you give the Narcan to somebody who doesn't need it, nothing really happens to them. So it's a thing that's used quite a bit. Into October of last year, the PA Physician General signed a bill that made Narcan over the counter. A family can go into a drugstore, and the pharmacist at his discretion can provide Narcan to the family members. And it's recommended that anybody has any type of opiate abuse in the family, that they have Narcan available, but also people who have somebody who is on chronic pain medication, especially elderly people, to have Narcan available because it can reverse those depressive effects of those medications if they're taken in the wrong number accidentally. So it is very, very important. There's training that's available. It's online to use the Narcan. The two types that are available are the nasal atomizer, in which the Narcan is sprayed into the nostrils, and the other is an injector. It's very similar to the injectors for some of the EpiPens, it actually talks you through doing the injection of the Narcan. So it's easy to use without making mistakes. It's recommended at any time Narcan is used, 911 be called. Again, the person's got to be monitored because the effects of the Narcan, the naloxone, can be shorter than the opiate, and we don't want the person going back into an overdose situation. One of the questions that we always hear is, isn't this enabling the addict to know that they can overdose? They aren't thinking about that, and those that are on the receiving end of the Narcan don't know that they were close to dying. All they know is they were trying to keep from getting sick, and that's when they used at that point.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit, just briefly, about some of the statistics that we're seeing here in York County. I'm going to move out a little bit because I can't look off the computer with my eyes or off the phone with my eyes. So as you can see, in 2013, we had 56 drug-related deaths. That's overall drug-related deaths in York County, and that was the year before I came into office. And I would say Chief Deputy Stabley will tell you that, for the few years before I came into office, that's what they had been seeing. I would say for about 10 years, drug deaths in the 40s, 50s, 60s, somewhere in that range, and no more. There were 17 of those 56 deaths that were heroin-related. But the final numbers for 2014, out of 110 drug-related deaths, so look at that number, how that bumped up massively, doubled basically in 1 year, the overall drug deaths. 62 of those were confirmed to be heroin-related. So we knew we had a problem because basically our heroin-related deaths had increased 3.5 times. And we sensed that problem early on, which I'll talk about here, which is why the Heroin Task Force was formed. Where are we at? Well, 2015, I'd like to say that we were down half or more. Unfortunately, our drug deaths have continued to increase. We have had 65 heroin-related deaths in 2015 in spite of using Narcan. But let me point out that we didn't get into this problem overnight. It took 15 years to get here, basically. It's all directly related to the prescription pain epidemic that exists in this country. And it's going to take a while to see a reversal. And it's going to take a lot of hard work, which is why we're here today, and I'm going to share with you some ways that you can help. One interesting thing out of those deaths last year, 85 out of the 95 overall drug deaths, and we still have a few pending, but most are in, 85 of them were opioid or opiate related. That is a huge, significant portion of the drug deaths, and that's a swing that we've noticed in the last 2 years. No longer are prescription drug deaths the #1 type of death that we see from drugs. Heroin is, but the opioids are definitely a huge chunk of our prescription drug deaths. And when we say drug deaths, we're talking about the drug deaths that are accidental. We're not talking about the suicidal drug deaths because we don't even include all those. And some of those, we don't always test for every suicide, but we're starting to see some individuals using heroin to complete suicide. And we have to make certain determinations to figure that out, but sometimes they'll write a note and they'll say that they're gonna use heroin. So we are starting to see that a little more. So when you think about the fact that, well, and for this year, by the way, I have people asking me this, we do have 1 confirmed so far, but there are 13 that we're expecting to be heroin related when they come back. So you can see our numbers are still continuing and actually probably increasing a little bit right now. In February, we saw an increase in saves, an increase in deaths also. It kind of goes hand in hand. So 99 Narcan saves that you heard about from between April of last year and the end of last year when we were using Narcan for the first time, law enforcement. That doesn't include EMS, doesn't include the Narcan saves by Pennsylvania State Police, doesn't include the Narcan saves that people just, basically come into the ER that, they come there directly. So 99 just from law enforcement. And what we like to say is we do feel we've made some progress in that regard, because obviously if you take those 99 saves and say, some of them became our cases because they eventually die, they get a brain injury because the Narcan's not administered quick enough and their families or friends didn't call for help soon enough, or maybe they weren't there. And so they become our cases. So let's say maybe 10 of those became our cases out of the 99, and maybe another 10 were repeat folks. People that use 4 hours later, they're using again. Believe it or not, that's what happens because they're deep in their addiction. So if you even take a net of about 70 of those Narcan saves and add them to our 65 deaths that we had last year, do you understand how significant the problem could have been were it not for Narcan? So we believe Narcan is not the cure. We know it's not, but we believe it's a huge Band-Aid, and we believe that it does help. But definitely it's much easier if we can get it at the front end before it gets to this point. In 2014, in the fall of 2014, there was this map that came out. Some of you may have been familiar with it or seen it. The newspapers did quite a bit of coverage of it. This was actually based on data that was submitted by all the coroners voluntarily throughout the state of Pennsylvania. We did submit, some of the counties didn't that are in white, but we never were quite sure how we stood in regards to the other counties in Pennsylvania until this map came out. But obviously, York is right here, and we're red, and that's bad. So basically that means more than 100 deaths. That's overall drug deaths, but when we saw that we compare pretty much to the Pittsburgh counties and the Philadelphia counties, that it really hit home and made us realize how significant this problem is. Then the DEA put a little pressure on the other coroners and said, hey, we would like the rest of your information, the ones that didn't contribute, and they did eventually. And so a new map came out, and again, it's showing York not quite as bad as Philadelphia, which had 655 overdose deaths, which I can't even imagine. But again, we're still in the dark colors, showing where we relate to the rest of the state, and it's pretty significant. And you think, how in the world? But we do think a lot of it has to do with our location, being along 83. Baltimore is supposedly the heroin capital of the world, which ADA Sunday will tell you about in a few minutes. But yeah, it's pretty bad. We're number 6 in Pennsylvania for the number of deaths per 100,000, as it says here, and number 4 in Pennsylvania for the number of drug deaths overall. That was for 2014. Our numbers for 2015 are very similar, so I would imagine our ranking is going to be very similar, unfortunately. We want to take a few minutes and show you a video now. When we're out in the schools, we talk a lot about the link between prescription drugs and heroin. So we're going to just take a few minutes and show this video. You'll see some actual York Countyans in this video, as well as families from York County who've lost their loved ones, and see if you can recognize there's actually an individual here who's in the video too. So.
As a parent, I think most of you are concerned about all these illegal drugs, the heroin, the marijuana, the meth, but you need to understand that the legal drugs are just as dangerous.
They're getting it from your neighbors, your friends. It's not hard at all.
If people are taking prescription drugs for non-medical purposes, they are not taking medicine. They're doing drugs.
It's easy to start, and it's painful to stop.
Prescription drugs are prescription for a reason. If you take too many of a prescription narcotic, you die.
Chelsea was very well liked by her friends and by her teachers.
Ronnie was going down to Tennessee State to be the next player to come out of Tennessee State.
Joey was extremely popular, just surrounded by friends.
Mark was an athletic, fit-looking kid.
Aaron enjoyed talking and debating with any and all people.
The prescription pain pill problem is a huge epidemic.
This is an epidemic.
This is an epidemic that is infiltrated our young people.
We never had a conversation with Joey about prescription drugs because we truly had no idea that there was any kind of recreational use going on.
How many guys know it's not used by
The first time I started doing painkillers was when I was 17.
I would steal pills from my friend's mom. Her stepmom had script for Vicodin. That was like heaven. I went in her room and stole Vicodin every day.
He would ask to use the bathroom in other people's homes, and he'd go in there and go in their medicine cabinets and steal prescription drugs.
These medications are available everywhere in every socioeconomic environment.
Ronnie was a starting halfback, one of our best players. He got several scholarship offers.
Ronnie was very popular in the neighborhood.
Ronnie was a neat freak, clean freak, always had his hair braided. When he got into the pill use, his mood changed. He changed, like, was that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde?
Ronnie's appearance really deteriorated, and it was really unlike him.
I said, "Are you doing drugs?" And my son looked at me with these eyes of, "How could you even think of that, Mom?"
I was walking up to football practice. My coach was walking towards me. He just had this crazy look on his face. He goes, "You think they might have found your brother?" And I was like, to me, I was like goofing. I was like, I didn't know he went missing. So I was like making her like goofing off. And he was like, "No, Justin, seriously, they might have found his body." And I was like, "Wait a minute." I was like, "Whoa, what?" He's like, "Yeah, they discovered a body in an apartment in Telford."
I never thought my son would take prescription drugs without a prescription.
Parents often trip themselves up by asking a simple question: "Are you using drugs?" No. One has to be able to say, "I'm seeing some signs here that concern me."
He was a little bit more argumentative. We thought that was maybe hormones.
The person has what we call pinpoint pupils. Literally, the pupils look like a pinpoint.
She slept odd hours.
We didn't know why he was sleeping so late.
If I wasn't able to get high, then I didn't want to get out of bed because, the physical withdrawals.
We were missing tinfoil from the kitchen, missing spoons.
We'd find the pens that were cut in half.
Straws.
There were a lot of charges coming on the credit cards.
We thought that there was somebody stealing money out of our account.
That's probably a pretty good clue there's something going on. Joey was pretty upset with his roommates. They were spending all their money on medication. Had I known that the medications that they were taking were so dangerous, I would have told them, "You're not even going back to that place."
If you feel something's going on, you gotta investigate.
I thought it was just a phase. We partied when we were in high school, and it's just sort of a phase you go through as you grow, experience life, and you grow out of it. And I thought he was on that track.
Joey had been found and he was unconscious. He had all these medications that he had just received from this doctor. More than likely, he crushed and snorted it. We're just being completely hit blindly by, a situation we had absolutely no understanding of and no notice of. And in the meantime, my husband's in the house. I'm out front in the front of the house, just, wondering what we're dealing with here. And so finally, Joe just came out and said, "He's gone."
I was downstairs getting ready for work. Cookie told me she couldn't get Mark up. Mark was powerful and had the nickname in some circles of Tank. I reminded her that what she had to do was get a cup of water and splash him with it and stay out of his way. And she told me it was different. We found a clear plastic bag of loose pills. I'm not sure if he even thought he was doing drugs, and I know that sounds crazy, but it's not like it was heroin or cocaine. We followed the ambulance to the hospital. A few minutes later, someone came in and told us that Mark was dead. We never thought that was a possibility.
I had no idea that kids were abusing medicine.
I came home one night, saw the basement light on, and went up to the window, and my son was crushing and snorting the pills.
We would find pills in the shoes, in the jackets that are hanging in the closet, in the pockets.
I found some pills hidden under his cushion.
They were in his socks. I never checked my kid's socks.
He took the light switch plate off and put them in there.
Look everywhere. Is it an invasion? No. You're doing the right thing as a parent.
I would question Chelsea, and she would always assure me that everything is fine and nothing's wrong.
Kids don't want to get in trouble, so they're going to tell you exactly what you want to hear.
There was always something down deep inside that said to me, something's wrong. You doubt yourself because you wonder if you're making a bigger deal out of something.
You know, maybe deep down my parents knew that I was high.
You can't always believe your child. Their lies get bigger when they're trying to hide substance abuse.
I knew her inside and out, and I remember Chelsea as the little girl that she used to be.
I looked at him and I only saw the most beautiful son in the world.
It was very difficult to think that she would be lying to me, which she was. She was out using and abusing prescription drugs.
Long-acting agents like OxyContin are meant to be delivered in the body over a period of hours, if not a day. If they're chewed, crushed, and snorted, you get the entire dose at one blast, and if the body's not ready to accommodate that, you will stop breathing.
We needed to call the police. But what are the neighbors going to think?
Put all of that aside and focus on what's important, as difficult as it may be.
Families can't get too caught up in the idea that, there may be an arrest, charge of my son or daughter, they could be in jail, they could be in the morgue.
The law saved my life. If my mom hadn't called the cops on me, I don't know where I would be right now.
It was the most difficult thing to do, to call the police on your own child. It was horrible. I have gone from putting importance on things like what college are you going to get into to just celebrating the fact that she's alive today. She's doing very well. She's clean and sober. She's productive. She's sweet. And I have her back, and I'm thankful. And it's wonderful.
Aaron had spent the night at a friend's, and they found him blue and non-responsive. They took him to a local hospital.
He was using Vicodin, which we found out through his toxicology, what was in his blood system.
I witnessed him have 2 heart attacks in ICU. He had staph, he had pneumonia, he went through seizures. The doctor was explaining to us that he was going to die. We held his hands on each side, and we started crying, and he just laid there.
People use the medications in an abusive way, not knowing what the full consequences are, and somebody ends up here.
Within 24 hours, Aaron had opened his eyes.
Parents are the first line of defense in terms of prescription drug abuse.
You got to sit your kids down. You just got to tell them about the severity of the problem.
There's a number of steps that you can take.
Educate your child and yourself very early.
Anybody who feels that this can't happen to my child,
it could happen to your kid.
Make sure that you don't have excess pills in your home.
Keep your medication locked up because you're never going to notice if something's gone.
What my mom does is she has these take-home pee tests that I got to take. No, I want to keep my mom proud of me, and I don't want to let her down.
You need to have the conversation with them about drug and substance abuse, and you need to include prescription drugs and guide them so they're able to get through their high school years and into college and through their college years drug-free.
Have this conversation before it's too late to have this conversation.
Back up, sorry. we really appreciate how it ends with Chelsea and hope. And that's really the message that we want to send out today, as well as when we're out in the community. When we started this, we had no idea really what to tell people other than call the York Adams Drug Alcohol number for detox and for rehab help. But we've learned a lot since then. Hopefully some of you got a chance to get some of our resource pages that we're laying out on our table. If not, hopefully there's some left that you can pick up. If not, we'll get them to you. But there's a lot of different options for families, and we're learning that. It's not easy. The process of detox and rehab, getting into them, is not easy. And of course, for many of these individuals, it's multiple stints of this. One of the things that we learned from our Center for Rural Pennsylvania hearing back in last August was that there needs to be longer stays in rehab. Some people need more intensive outpatient when they get out of rehab. Sometimes they need medication assistance. And I know that's somewhat of a stigma and controversial, but for some people with this drug in particular, because of what it does to the brain and the dopamine receptors, they need more time, and sometimes they need a weaning with methadone, with Suboxone, with Vivitrol, with counseling, along with all those things. We have had a lot of individuals who die trying to stay abstinent, and we know that we have a lot less individuals who die with methadone and Suboxone. So to me, it just makes sense. I know that it's not necessarily a cure, and it's not sobriety, but for some individuals, that is what it takes with this addiction. And actually, you'll have drug and alcohol counselors who's been doing it for 30 years that will tell you this is the worst addiction they've ever seen. And so, we've had an epiphany. We've opened our eyes. We've been educated by addiction specialists in our task force, and we're learning. So these are some of the resources. White Deer Run, obviously, is the detox center in York, but there's several others that they affiliate with, and there's a lot of ones that York County Drug and Alcohol Commission affiliates with that are, we can get you if we're out of those papers, but there were some papers laying there. I just want to talk for 2 or 3 minutes yet about some of the changes that have happened in York County and how you can be involved. We always tell our families, please get rid of your old and unused prescription drugs. That's the #1 way you can help. Each police department has a drop box, and there were flyers there with all those police departments' addresses if you need them. You don't have to be from that particular jurisdiction. And there's a mobile drop box that comes into Delta and picks up there occasionally. So definitely there's ways you can get rid of those drugs. And certainly all these other things that are listed here, learning about the legislation, calling your legislators. You can go to our Heroin Task Force website. There's a lot of information there for you, some of the same information, ways that you can get involved in supporting programs like this today. And also, encouraging your middle school, high school to check into some of the education that's available. We do go out to those places, as does, I think, the city police are going out to those schools, but Burns Education Center actually partners with us, and they do a great interactive training with the students, middle school and high school students, and they just started doing that in January. It's called Heroin, the Wake-Up Call, and they actually have grant funding for that right now, so the schools can take that on at no cost, and hopefully that grant money will continue, but for now, if you want to get it into your schools, check with Burns Education Center, get your administrators to call them and arrange something. They'll be glad to get in there and do that program. There's all sorts of ways that we want to try and get this in the front end, obviously, before kids even start to think about using this terrible drug. And there's definitely that link, because they do tend to use prescription drugs in school, and then by the time they hit their 20s, they're crossing over to heroin. That's what we're seeing all the time. I just skipped too many slides, I think. I just want to talk briefly about the task force before I introduce ADA Sunday, Senior Deputy Prosecutor Sunday. We basically, in 2011 and 2012, had seen the deaths about the same. As I said, 2013, they increased a little bit, 2012 and 13. And then, we knew by February of 2014 that these deaths were gonna, already surpass the year before. So basically, the coroner's office, the district attorney's office got together, met with some police chiefs, and sort of developed a different approach to how we were handling drug deaths in York County. We'd only ever been doing a toxicology. We rarely prosecuted up to that point. We decided to take some recommendations from the National Association of Medical Examiners as well as the National Institute of Justice, start doing autopsies on all these heroin-related deaths because we felt because it was an illicit drug, we hopefully could prosecute those a little more readily. Not that it's easy in any way, shape, or form. And so that's sort of what was the launching pad, basically, for the Heroin Task Force forming. So the DA's office uses a charge called drug delivery resulting in death. The dealer is hopefully prosecuted if we can find the dealer. It's very difficult to do, especially when you have as many deaths as we do. But what we're finding, too, is some of the deaths are linked. In other words, they had the same dealer or that person died and then 2 months later their friend dies. And so we can kind of figure out some of that, which is really amazing and interesting. Law enforcement in the DA's office is very important to that. They're taking the phones right away. They're, trying to, basically find these dealers, which is they're doing hard, aggressive work, and we really are appreciative of it. And the autopsy helps because it shows that nothing else caused their death but that drug or that mix of drugs. So that's why the autopsy is recommended. So there's a lot of changes. We began alerting the public about it and the media. You hear a lot about it. I know every day some people probably have a little heroin fatigue, but this is going to be around for a while before it starts reversing its trend, we believe. The media has been really helpful with a lot of stories about the families and how they're impacted. We are very appreciative of that. As I said, we're just constantly involved wherever we can be in the community. We've done this particular presentation about 80 times now in the community. There is some legislation that is still in the works. One of the things that's coming on the pike here soon is the Prescription Database Monitoring Program, which some of you may have heard about. The prescription drug program, where they're going to be able to tell who's doctor shopping. The pharmacies and the physicians will have access to it. We just found out the coroners are going to have access to it. And that will help us be able to figure out, okay, who's overprescribing or who is maybe not letting their physician know that they were just down the street at another physician, that kind of thing, and it's going to stop that. The concern is that when there's a more restriction placed, that perhaps there will be a few that will cross over to heroin that ordinarily wouldn't have. And so while those restrictions are placed on those individuals, we could see a little bit of a spike is what our concern is, so we're trying to prepare ourselves for that. But that, hopefully by the end of the year, will become will be taking place. It's voluntary, it's not mandatory just yet. We did push for a lot of the legislation, like the Good Samaritan Law and Narcan and so on. I just want to talk lastly about the improvement in York County with treatment. We know it's not perfected yet, we understand that. But if you notice, the methadone spots have increased, the detox beds have increased at White Deer Run. They're getting ready to put a methadone clinic in at Hanover, in the Hanover area. Right now, those individuals have to go to Westminster or to York for their methadone. And, I know some people still consider that sort of a controversial treatment, but I've changed my views on that. Because, like I said, I see a lot of people who are functioning, contributing members of society. They get their jobs back, they get their kids back. Many of them, if they have that counseling and support right there along with their methadone, can function and give back. And they get their lives back, and it really does make a difference. The ultimate goal is sobriety, but for some of these individuals, the methadone is their path to sobriety, to eventual sobriety. So we need to start getting rid of the stereotype in our mind that you're replacing one thing with another, because truly, your choice is getting their life back or being totally abstinence for some of these people and not being able to handle the abstinence, and they basically die. And that's what we see in almost every single one of our cases. So for some people, medication assistance is a solution. And so these are some of the sources and resources that we use in this presentation. If anybody wants any of this, you can get it later. And I'm going to turn it over to Senior Deputy Prosecutor Sunday, and then Detective Schaefer will be speaking for a few minutes before we open it up for questions.
Good morning. Thank you everyone for being here. One of the most important parts of these presentations are the questions that are asked, and the questions that are asked by you, because we don't have all the answers. We don't even know where to begin in a lot of cases. And we, through every single one of these presentations, learn by questions that are asked of us. And I want to give you full opportunity to ask as many questions as possible. So although I am a lawyer, I will try to be as brief as I can with my remarks. That being said, last night I went to bed early because I wanted to be refreshed for this morning. And around 11:30, my 17-month-old son started crying. And so my wife and I go into the room, and he has a fever. And needless to say, it was a long night in my son's room. And we're sitting in the room, and I was thinking about this morning's presentation. And I looked up on my son's bookshelf, and I saw a book called The Little Blue Truck. Okay? Now, I'm going to set that aside for the moment. We'll come back to that. And so I'm sitting in there, and my wife is dabbing my son's head with like a washcloth and trying to get his fever down. And so we're sitting there, and I'm thinking about, what message do I want to give this morning? What is the takeaway from this talk? Okay? The takeaway is every single person in this room needs to become an advocate. And when I say an advocate, I don't just mean going and speaking to people in a venue like this. I mean an advocate in your homes, in your neighborhoods, in your churches. Because right now, all across York County, there are thousands of people that still do not believe that there's a problem. They do not believe that there's an epidemic. They don't believe that heroin exists in the county. And they don't think that prescription pills are a problem. 3 years ago at Christmas, one of our longtime family friends came over, a friend of my parents, and he had great news for us. And he said, my son just got accepted to a study abroad trip in South America. And that's fantastic. That's just wonderful news. We're so happy for you. Well, about 6 months later, I'm in my office. I'm a prosecutor, and Detective Schaefer can attest to this. But when someone gets charged with a crime and it comes up to the DA's office, you get a file. And drug crimes are white folders. It's a white file. Okay? You're no longer the human being that you were. You are now a person, paperwork in a file. And across the desk came a name that looked familiar to me. And it was the name of my friend's son who was in South America on a study abroad trip. He was actually in York County Prison. He was in York County Prison because he was arrested for dealing heroin. He was 18 years old, and I went and I found my friend, and we had a long talk. And he explained to me that his son, who was a straight A honor student at one of our local high schools, who was an amazing athlete with prospects of playing at college, went away to a local college here, and he became introduced to prescription pills. And what he told me was, it wasn't just one or two people using pills occasionally. What he said was, because his son was very open about it, was at all the parties they went to, there were pills everywhere, because kids are drinking and popping pills. And based on your physiological makeup, some people are more susceptible to becoming addicted to those pills. And sure enough, halfway through his freshman year, he became a pill addict, to the point where he blew out his entire college loan within about a month on about $400 to $600 a day pill habit. Okay? When he couldn't afford that anymore, and this is a story, I would say 80 to 90%, that statistic varies, 80 to 90% of everyone who becomes addicted to heroin starts with prescription pills. So he started with prescription pills, he couldn't afford it anymore, and sure enough, one of his good friends at college said, well, you know what, let me help you out. Just try this. So sure enough, he tried heroin, and that was all she wrote. Okay? Now, there are many tragedies here, but one of them is the lack of education and awareness on the part of my friend. Okay? And what I mean by that is, when I talked to him, he explained to me he had no idea that this was a problem. They never even discussed it in their home. It wasn't discussed in school. And so he did not have the tools as a parent to do what he needed to do to educate his son. Now, his son made his own decisions, of course, but we as parents, and I was thinking about this last night when I was giving Motrin, what tools do we need as parents to be able to fight this battle? And that's the important takeaway from these discussions. That's what we are here for. It's to give everyone the tools they need to be able to have a meaningful conversation with whoever it may be and understand what we're facing. I spoke at a school recently, and I was invited, and I said to the school, it was a group of 10th graders, how many people in here have either used or seen someone using prescription pills? No one raised their hand. I looked at the teacher, and I was like, out. Teacher left. How many people here either have used or know someone that used prescription pills? Every hand went up. Every single hand. Every hand. That is scary. And it's scary for a million different reasons. To go back to the prescription pills, when you look around, when you think about your home, your medicine cabinets, that's where they get them. That's where it comes from. When we do the prescription pill drop boxes, we did a first one, a rural one, where we actually drove a truck down to Delta, Pennsylvania. And you guys know where Delta is. And so they have a Welsh choir, I was told. It's supposed to be good. But so we went down to Delta, and we said, bring your unused prescription pills, because Delta is currently, and that whole southern part of the county is going through a tremendous heroin crisis. So we sat up a box. We had a detective stand there. In 4 hours, we received over 80 pounds of prescription pills. Okay? And Detective Schaefer can go into detail about this, but the price for prescription pills on the market, when I say the market is out on the street, is around $1 per milligram. You have a 30 milligram tablet, that's around $30 a tablet. You have 30 tablets, $300. That's a lot of money. And so what happens are, this is supply and demand. You have kids who say, I can sell a few pills, I can make a lot of money, and we can all use them together, and lo and behold, bad things happen. So with regard to that, my friend, when I spoke to him, I want to talk about his story a little more. I talked to him and I said, well, how's your wife taking this? What's going on? And he said, well, things are awful at home. Our home is destroyed, meaning our relationship. Every day, and this is important because, people think that this is so far away, this problem, and they think that, this can't happen to me. As a prosecutor, I'm not a police officer. I'm not an expert in addiction. I'm a lawyer. And I go up to court, and every day you see people walk in their orange jumpsuit, chains on their hands, chains on their feet. They shuffle up and they sit down at the table. And most of the time, you look in the back of the courtroom, and there's parents. And there's tears streaming down their eyes. They can't touch them. They can't hug them. They can't talk to them. And my friend's wife, every day, went to York County Prison and took pastries to the prison guards. And the reason she did that was because she thought that the prison guards would look out for her son in prison if she gave them pastries. And I actually followed up with the prison out of curiosity. And I said, did you have a lady bring pastries? And they said, yeah. And she's not the only one. That being said, this isn't a tale of total death and destruction here. The reason I'm telling you this is because I want to arm you with the tools and the information you need so that when this is over today and the PowerPoint goes away and we all go back to our jobs and you go back to your lives, in your head you will remember this is a serious problem. We're facing an epidemic. I'm going to talk to my kids. I'm going to talk to my neighbors. I'm going to let them know you start popping pills, you got a major problem. I want to take a step back and I want to go back to the little blue truck. That book was actually given to me by Charlene Scaretta. She gave it to me when my son was born 17 months ago. And on the inside cover, she wrote, "May all your dreams come true." We're here because we want to create a community where all of our children's dreams can come true. And the only way we can do that is by working together. And so I implore everyone here to become members of the Heroin Task Force on your own and do everything you can to communicate, to learn, and to also provide us with information because we learn every day. So I thank you very much for taking the time to listen to us. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
We're going to have Detective Schaefer up here for a minute, and then we'll have, or for a few minutes, he has some comments, and then I just want to say a personal shout out to the York City Police Department because they've been working real closely with us. One of the things that we're looking at over the next couple months is harm reduction, and you'll hear more about that in the next few weeks. And the York City Police Department is working closely with the Heroin Task Force as well as the Coroner's Office and trying to resolve some of these issues and make it safer for the addicts in general. And thank you for being here today, Andy.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Every panel has a village idiot on it. That's me. You found them. I'm not even going to pretend that I'm as smart as these people up here. What I'm going to talk about today is what I see in the street, what we see on a daily basis, the other drug detectives. But before I get started, I want to give a shout out to the Lehman Center is here, friends of mine I've known for a long time. Auction April 26th. Even if you don't go for the auction, go for the bean soup and for the chicken corn soup. It's unbelievable. Gary Calhoun is in the back. He's got a bum ankle. Raise your hand, Gary. If you want to beat him in a game of basketball, today's the day. I told him I'm going to challenge him. Again, my name's Detective Schaefer, the York City Police Department. I've been a police officer in the city about 20 years. Almost my entire career, I've worked narcotics in the city of York. I work narcotics and prostitution. 98% of our time is spent on narcotics. We do not do a whole lot of prostitution work. When time allows, we will do that. Everything that I talk about again today is going to be things that I've seen, that we've dealt with over our careers. I've also worked with a lot of other great detectives before myself, John Derryman and Jim McBride, that were on 25 years before me. So I bring a lot of experience, been dealing with those guys and myself over the past 20 years to have probably 40, 45 years of drug experience or knowledge that I've dealt with in the past. These are new too, Joanne. A lot of my presentation, I've done a lot of these over the years. Smoke Stably covered a lot of it. Usually my presentations are an hour long. Not going to happen today. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. And I thank Lieutenant Phelps for introducing me. And when he gave my resume, and I'm very proud of my resume, but what I'm most proud of is I'm also a father. I have 3 young boys, 19, 17, and 14, who live in York County. We live right up the road here in Dover. Go ahead and make the redneck jokes. I've heard them. They're true. They're true. My wife was a city school teacher for 23 years. She left the city of McKinley School and went up to Littlestown about 3 years. So she's an educator in York County for the past 26 years. So very attached, again, born and raised in York County. Have a lot of personal vested interest in this. One of the detectives I work with, another narcotics detective who I've grown up with through the department, known his kids growing up through the entire time. His son passed away 2 years ago from heroin. That's what he does for a living. You know, it wasn't a secret. He's dealt with this over the past 4 or 5 years prior to his death. His position, and I think a lot of police officers' position, including mine, up to years ago, is if you got a drug problem, you got a heroin problem, then stop. Don't use it. If you're drinking alcohol, using cocaine, using heroin, stop, don't use it. It's not that easy. And I can tell you over the course of my career as a police officer and growing up and maturing as an adult, I've learned that there is this powerful thing as addiction. I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people that use drugs or addicts or people just starting to use drugs or using drugs. I've never run into a single one, not a one that said, Schaefer, you know, this is the greatest thing in the world. I found what I want to do. I want to get high the rest of my life. It doesn't happen. prostitutes. I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds of prostitutes over the years. Not a single one has ever told me, man, I just love having sex. That's why I'm a prostitute. Not a single one. Every one of them, they're prostituting to get that fix, to get the money for the next bag or the next hit off a crack pipe. It's a terrible, terrible addiction. Again, as long as I've been doing drugs or working drugs, and that's always a joke too, when my wife introduced me somewhere, as a living, I buy drugs and pick up prostitutes. And it's true. All those are true. Although the longer I've been in the department, I do not do a whole lot of undercover work anymore, but it is a good job, and I've learned a lot over the years. And one of the reasons, and I'll show you, and usually I have a smaller group I speak to, and I'll show everybody some heroin a little bit. When I first started my first year, again, grew up in York County, middle class family, graduated Christian School of York, probably as boring as can be, my life at that point, which was good. When I first started the job, my first year or two on the job, I was on a unit called the Red Shirts, street crime reduction unit. We worked around a lot of drugs. Chief Cayley was my sergeant at the time. The first time we walked down the street, the first day or two, some guy dropped something, I picked it up. Hey, well, what did he drop? It was a bundle of heroin. I had no idea. Never was around it when I was a kid, never saw it when I was a kid. Growing up, my young adulthood, just never saw it. And of course, over the next 18 years, I've dealt with it, thousands of times. I'm going to pass around. Is Lieutenant Fell still here? And Jackie? I'm going to pass around. I brought some different heroin, what it looks like. And the picture up here, heroin in York County. And again, I know Smoke covered a lot of this stuff, so I'll go through and just hit on a couple other points. Heroin in York County is sold in glassine bags. Heroin is sold in increments of grams. Each bag in a glassine bag usually has 0.03 to 0.04 hundredths of a gram. So this particular bag here that I'm holding up, and I have Lieutenant Fells walk this around along with Jackie, is about 7 grams. That will literally make hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bags of heroin. A lot of times, anybody that's a hard heroin user, they'll keep these glassine bags around. And again, I'll pass some of these around also. It's very important I get these back. Very, very, very important. I got 1 in college. I want to get the other 2 in college. I can't lose my job or my pension. I'm sure most of you here know Jackie and Lieutenant Fells, and I certainly trust both of them. Very important I get them back. That is real heroin. That is real raw heroin. The bags that Jackie are passing around are real heroin inside of glassine bags. Usually, and when we've heard this time and time again today about users starting off with prescription pills, that's what we're seeing on a regular basis right now. Again, a lot of time a user will start off with 1 bag, 2 bags a day, they'll snort it, and then very often it leads to the injection process. In order to inject heroin needs to be put in a spoon, heated up, not always, some heroin will melt depending on where the heroin comes from, inside the spoon. It's then sucked up inside the needle. Some kind of cotton is used when they're sucking it out of the spoon, because when heroin comes in, it's not all pure, and there's still little pieces of particles in that, and then it's ingested in the human body. Like Smoke said, we've seen it. Users use it anywhere. I mean, you name a vein, it's put in. So if you're looking for someone that's a user, you don't always look in the arm. It can be virtually anywhere. The other thing I'll pass around here is a crack pipe, or also something that can be used to ingest heroin. I'll give this to Lieutenant Fells also. When you're looking at that, I don't know how many people have been in, a bodega in the store in the city in the corner, or Rutter's. How many people have seen the single stem roses that they sell for $1? I couldn't buy one of them for my wife. But Those roses, they're not being sold as roses. Yeah, you can buy them. I guess you can take that home, that plastic rose to your wife and give it to it. But that's a crack pipe or a way to ingest heroin. They take that glass container, they break it, you can make two out of it, you put a piece of choy in it or some kind of filter, and now you got a crack pipe or you have a way to ingest heroin. And like Smoke said, you put it on a piece of foil, you heat it up and suck it in that way. Car antennas. Break a car antenna off, they're hollow inside, you have a crack pipe or a way to ingest heroin. They come up with variety of different ways. Soda can, beer can, crush it a little bit, put some holes in it, and you can put your substance on top of that. The troubling thing that we've seen again, and I've seen heroin forever, ever since I've been on the job and working the job. But recently, over the past 3 years, heroin has just taken off. The guys I work with in the city, we put probably 90% of our time into heroin arrests. And just this last week, I'll pass some pictures around. Just this last 2 weeks, we've gotten we hit a couple search warrants. We got well over 100 grams of heroin. Another one, we got $100,000 worth of heroin. And again, this isn't something, I remember probably 9 years ago, I did a search warrant, and I got maybe 12, 15 grams of heroin. At that time, Bill Graff was up at the district attorney's office. We had a party. He came down, we got pictures, everybody shaking hands, they bought pizza for us that day. It was a great thing. That is now a daily thing that we do almost on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. It's just something that we see all the time. Heroin also has come down in price. Ever since the officers, I'll pass these around. I don't need those back. Ever since when I first started narcotics, and again, the guys before me, who they went by, they had street names. Their street names were Gumby and Redbeard, but that was their street names as drug detectives. Heroin was always $20 a bag. When you went to buy heroin, which also can be called, heroin on the streets also called matego, Spanish word for it, H, fire, burn, different words they come up for it on the street. Boy is another name for heroin on the street. For pretty much my entire career up to the past 3 years, and prior to that, the 20, 25 years where those detectives worked, heroin was always $20 a bag. Same increment, same amount of heroin inside the bag, but it was always $20 a bag. We've been buying heroin, and we bought heroin this week for $5 a bag. Unheard of. That's never happened. And that's common. And what happens most of the time, the heroin's coming out of a larger city. They buy in bulk form here and there, bring it to York County, double their money. Drug dealing is about making money. That's all it's about. So it's extremely cheap right now. When you can buy a bundle of heroin for $40, $50, and again, years ago, it was selling for $120 to $150. Again, and that was for years and years and years. It's unheard of. We've never seen it. And also we've seen where a lot of our time years ago we spent on crack cocaine and cocaine, and we just don't see that as much anymore. It's flip-flopped over the past 3 years. And most of the people that we are seeing, I dealt with a young lady last week. She was pregnant, had a baby, had a C-section, had a lot of pain. Her mother-in-law gave her a Vicodin, and that was it. And that Vicodin turned into another Vicodin, turned into heroin. And when I saw her last week, she was missing half her top teeth. She was a terrible heroin addict. A gentleman I just talked to yesterday has been a heroin addict, is in his mid-30s, and I've heard this numerous times. When there's an overdose on the street or someone gets heroin and they almost die from it, or they do die from it, that's where everybody goes and looks for that heroin. Whatever reason, and again, I can't explain this, that addiction's that bad that they want to get that, they want to get right to the edge. They want to get right to the edge of almost dying and get that high. And again, word gets out in the street. As Smoke said, just about every baggie is stamped with some kind of brand. And if it's Colt 45, Game Over, which we just had 2 weeks ago, that's what people want to buy. And again, I can't explain that to you. That's all I have for right now. Again, the first slide had my number up there. If anybody has any questions or would like to talk to me, I don't tell anybody no. I've done these presentations for about 9 years. Years ago, it used to be all on cocaine and that kind of stuff. It's changed. But on the first slide, again, it's Schaefer. My cell number's there. Give me a call. I'll talk to whoever, whenever, and I'll do whatever I can for your organization or your group. Thank you.
Stay up here, don't go there, because we need you for questions. Okay, we're gonna turn it over for some questions from the audience, and do you wanna handle that, Gene?
We're going to put the screen up, and they're going to be sitting up there in just a second. We have some wireless microphones that we'll be passing around. If you have a question, just raise your hand. And also, just a reminder, I know some people are on time constraints and you have to leave. So we just want to remind you of the evals that are on your table. Make sure you fill those out. Make sure you grab some of the flyers that are in the back. Again, we want to thank Bill Galliento. He's in the back with the Church of Open Door. And earlier, where's Andy at? Andy? Oh, okay. Earlier, Pastor Reed was here, who is the head pastor from the church. Also in the back, if you would just acknowledge and appreciate Cliff Kern. He is from the White Rose TV. He is doing our videotaping today. There will be a video made up for this. I'm a little concerned because there is one bag of heroin sitting back there. Danny, watch that for me, please. I don't want to lose my job either. I have a son in college too, okay? Again, if you enjoyed some of the refreshments on the table, please, please, please take your cups, take your lids, take your napkins, take your plates, and whatever else trash you brought, throw them in the trash cans as you leave, okay? And again, the flyers and tables are on there. And before you leave, one big round of applause for our presenters again. They will answer questions, but if you're leaving, just let them that you appreciated that today. Again, thank you. So they're going to go have a seat. We're going to get started with the Q&A. Thanks. Is there, slide? Yeah, we only got one. We only got one then. Okay? Still have to pass that around, and we'll use this one here. All right, I have one question to get started here. Why is this so bad in this area? I think the other questions I may have had between Smoke and the other presenters, you may have answered those questions, but why so bad here in York County?
That's a tough question. Again, I think it has a lot to do with prescription pills. I think it has a lot to do with the access of the drug itself. Years ago, there was other drugs that people thought were going to be coming to this area, but the heroin and the cocaine and that kind of stuff is just so readily available. Unfortunately, we could leave here. I could take anybody in this room, other than probably Lieutenant Fells, and go down somewhere here in York County or within 2 miles of here, and we could buy heroin within 5 minutes. It's just so readily available and so many people selling it.
One other thing that I would say is York is a huge recovery community. I believe one of the largest in the state of Pennsylvania as far as recovery houses is what I've been told. And if you remember, a lot of our decedents, those who died from heroin, were in a recovery house or just left a recovery or rehab. And so we believe that the dealers come here and prey on those individuals as a result. I'm not sure, is that what you kind of see too?
Yeah. As bizarre as it sounds, what we found over the past couple of years, the library in York City, the people that are in recovery houses have to go and apply for jobs, look for jobs online. That's where the drug dealers end up. Same thing with recovery houses too. They know if you got 20, 25 addicts in a recovery house, there's a good chance you're going to be able to sell drugs there.
And in addition to that, geographically, there's been a lot of, you may have seen it on 60 Minutes, there's a program on HBO, but the Port of Baltimore is essentially the heroin capital of the United States. And the majority of the heroin that comes in via the waterways comes in through the Port of Baltimore. Obviously, we have close proximity to Baltimore, and so geographically, we're kind of in a tough spot. And in addition to that, with regard to the recovery homes, You know, a lot of the recovery homes are a vital part of the recovery process if they're done correctly. Unfortunately, there are a lot of unscrupulous recovery home owners who are using it just to make a little bit of money. A lot of them don't live in York County. They don't live in Pennsylvania. Because they just buy a house, and this is now Smoke's Recovery House, and people go there, and unfortunately they're located in some areas where you have a tremendous amount of drug dealers. And so in New York City alone, I believe that there's over 100 of them. And there are no regulations with regard to the homes. By law, they can kind of do what they want unless they take insurance money. So other than that, unfortunately, that's a difficult situation, but I mean, there's a tremendous amount of different factors that play into it, and I think that we're all learning them as we go.
And there's voluntary regulations that are down the pike coming. They have been proposed, and that will be coming out. And basically, people are going to get more in tune with looking for those homes that have those credentials. But that is coming.
Hi, we've talked about some Band-Aids like Narcan, which are some great things in place to save lives. And we're getting new regulations in, and we're doing education and awareness. But I'm wondering what other prevention measures are being taken, and are there any particular programs that you guys are involved in that are more preventative?
Well, you know, there's education, you know, the education component that Burns is doing. I talked about the task force, the police departments. You know, some of the actual recovery and treatment centers are doing their own education. I was just at a workshop last night for families. Of course, that wasn't so much prevention because they already have addicts in their families. But they are, you know, that is actually free and open to the public, that type of education. Safe Haven is doing that. But there are a lot of recovery entities in the community, outpatient entities, that are getting involved in some of the education too, as well as York Adams Drug and Alcohol Commission. So that's sort of what's going on prevention-wise right now.
And in addition to that, one of the things that we faced in the very beginning, well, I don't want to say in the beginning because this has been going on for hundreds of years, but about 2 years ago when we formed the Heroin Task Force, the reason we did it was because, I mean, quite frankly, we didn't know what to do. And we pulled together people with different areas of expertise from all different walks of life. We have medical doctors. We now have school board. We have school superintendents. And so the reason we did that was, you know, can we draw upon all of our own expertise, levels of expertise and experience to come up with things? And so that being said, one of the things we're discovering now, because previously all these different entities worked sort of in their own silo. Okay, and we all sort of spun in our silo, we did our own thing, and people weren't communicating with each other. Well, now that we have 30 or 40 people in the same room, okay, and we're all letting everybody know what they're doing, it is creating all kinds of additional ideas. And just to give an example, we thought of, hey, you know, what can we do to get kids to really think about this? And so we came up with the idea, well, why don't we do a contest and have all the kids in York County come up with, they can design a billboard, an anti-heroin billboard, and the winner, it goes up on a billboard. Well, you would think that's not an easy thing to do, but guess what? We had the head of the Superintendent's Association. We said to him, is this something you guys can do? Absolutely. Okay. We then went to, because we have the business community on board, does anyone want to pay for this? Absolutely. Done. And so right now, that's something you're going to see probably in the next 3 or 4 months. You're going to see billboards going up that are designed by kids in schools. And by doing that, that makes them actually think about it, because kids are their level of creativity, they're going to come up with stuff that none of us would ever have even thought of. And so that being said, we're just trying to think outside of the box, because what has been happening hasn't worked. So if anyone has any suggestions, we'll listen to anything. So.
One other thing that's occurring, and we're pretty excited about it, there's a huge connection, as we've talked about, between prescription medications and the heroin problem. And we're seeing hospitals and health systems now come on board trying to set up monitoring, set up ways to change the thought process of providing those prescriptions for people. And can we look at alternative means of pain management, things like that? So we are seeing a little bit of inroads with that, and that's an exciting part.
We have WellSpan physicians on the Heroin Task Force, and WellSpan has really taken an initiative. We're really pleased with that.
And there's one other thing here that's really important is, like, in addition to that, yeah, we have doctors, we have WellSpan on board, and through that, we also advocate for legislation. Okay, so we have a representative on board, we have state senator on board, Senator Wagner and Representative Regan, and we have a bunch of other people, commissioners. And so, but the point is, one of the problems was Pennsylvania was one of the only states where there was no prescription drug database. So if Shar decides she's going to go to 10 doctors today and get 10 different prescriptions for OxyContin, each doctor had no way of making a determination as to whether or not she had already been at places earlier that day. And so now that was something we advocated for, that was passed, although it hasn't been funded yet because we don't have a budget. But once that's done, doctors will be able to look up a patient and say, hey, it appears as if you've been making the rounds all day today. That didn't exist before. And so that's just another idea, suggestion, something else that we're doing.
I just had a question about something that Coroner Gay mentioned, the prescription database monitoring program. That legislation is going through House and Senate right now. Do we have a Senate or House bill that we can write to our legislators about?
The number was, I think I had the number up on the slideshow. I may not have, but I'll get it to you, the exact number. Is there a way I can send it to Ann, and can she send it out to, I don't know who I'm talking to here, but see me afterward, and I'll give you my card, and we'll get that number to you. But yes, it is supposedly they've already partially funded it, and they're telling us. I was just talking to Secretary Tennis via email last week, and he tells us that it will be by the end of the year, if maybe even by fall. So.
Okay, I have a comment and a question. I've worked direct care with folks who are in mental health group living situations, and I noticed how much medication changes. And so there would be these huge piles of medication that would be kept in filing cabinets. And I'm just wondering how much those individual providers are, across the county given ways to successfully get rid of medications that are expired. So that's just a comment. And then the question is, in terms of neighborhoods with some of the recovery houses, I was looking at the paper that was on the table over there, and within my neighborhood in York City, there's a couple of recovery houses that I wasn't aware of. So what can we do as, community members to be helpful and be vigilant, to be supportive of good things, but also to be aware of what should we look out for. Can we invite somebody into our neighborhood association just to inform, the neighbors of, and that's the question.
Okay, well, let me just answer your first part, and then I'm going to let Detective Schaefer answer your second part. In regards to the providers, you said they have prescriptions in their filing cabinets. Okay, I was just trying to understand what you were saying. Okay. I would say, you can contract with entities who will come in and take those off your hands and destroy them. I don't know. I do know that we did a presentation 3 times in the last week with WellSpan providers. Actually, Dr. Eckerling, who's on task force, and talked about getting rid of old and unused prescriptions. But I don't think he actually broached that topic of the fact that they have these prescriptions maybe in their offices. So I have no idea. That's a very good point. I'll bring it up to him and see what's being done. But thank you for drawing that to our attention, because I didn't even realize that. So,
as far as the houses in your neighborhood, and this goes for anybody, whether it's a halfway house, recovery house, or you think your next door neighbor's dealing drugs, I tell everybody it's a gut feeling. If you see cars coming there or people coming, going in the house, leaving within 30 seconds, people going out in the car, riding around the block within minutes, it's a gut feeling. Call me. Call the city police. If you live in the outside jurisdiction, call one of those police departments. If you want somebody to come to the neighborhood association, get a hold of Lieutenant Fells, get a hold of me. I don't say no. I've never said no. I'll go wherever, whenever. We'll be there. Lieutenant Fells will make sure that gets done. He'll make sure what other resources you need within the city, and that goes out in the county also. If I go out in the county and do a lot of speaking things, I don't say no. Whether it's 2 people, 3 people, or if they want to come into my office and sit down at my office and talk to me, I don't say no.
Hi. I understand that there's more conversation with the medical profession about prescriptions and tracking prescriptions, but how about with the pharmacies? Is there anything set up in place so pharmacies can talk to each other about, we filled a prescription for patient A, any kind of internal system or anything coming down the pike?
That is actually all part of that same bill. So the pharmacists as well as the physicians will be able to voluntarily participate in that program. So they're included in that. Pharmacists, physicians, and coroner's offices. So.
Andy, the question came up, the pipe that you gave out, is that sometimes used for both cocaine and heroin? They don't have a specialized pipe for either?
Yeah, that could be used. All you need, again, with the heroin, you put it on a piece of tin foil, and you can suck up the fumes for that, or you can put the piece of crack right inside that pipe. Again, anything that's a hollow item can be used to ingest cocaine or heroin.
I have a question. I'm currently working with a family right now who they've had a long ongoing history of heroin use. The mom is clean right now, but something that I've come up against is the more holistic, natural ways to detox and work on managing pain, specifically something called kratom. I don't know if you guys have experience with that, but I've done a little bit of internet research, and I know it's kind of fuzzy about what it does, what it doesn't do, if it will be legal, if it won't. I just don't know if there's anything you can tell me a little bit more about it, because she's buying it off the internet, and obviously that's not something that is controlled, so.
Well, you're actually the second person today that brought that up to me. I have never heard of it. I just asked Detective Schaefer, he's never heard of it. I'm going to definitely research this when we get back. I don't know. My concern about using anything that might be herbal or synthetic is we don't know. That's not FDA approved, and I know some people, there's controversy with that, but there's no standardization there. So you don't know really what you're getting. And so you could be taking something that could be very harmful, or if it's combined with something else, it could be very harmful. I don't think that homeopathy is necessarily the way to go for heroin treatment. That's my own personal opinion, I guess, and as a nurse. But I think, yeah, you could be dealing with something similar to synthetic marijuana that's really dangerous, and hard to trace and track. So. But I'll research it, because I'm curious now. So.
Just recently, there was an information sheet put out about some of the synthetic kind of things that are being seen. In 2014 in Alberta, in Canada, they encountered substances being manufactured in China, and it's called WD-18. It's a synthetic opioid. It's not regulated in any way at all at this point. It can be ordered through China. And I read that the DEA has indicated that it's about 100,000 times more potent than morphine. And they've actually had deaths in Alberta. We don't have any reported deaths in the United States yet. But again, just by changing some of the formulations, people try to circumvent the laws. And so
it might be quote unquote legal, but it doesn't mean it's good for you.
So these synthetics, sometimes, we don't know what they are. The DEA doesn't know what they are, and they've got to do a lot of further testing on them then.
My other concern with that is they're trying to treat their addiction themselves. They're not, or their pain management. They're not getting a medical opinion. They're not they're not getting the counseling and support that they need to really maintain sobriety or achieve sobriety. And so that concerns me, that you're missing. It'd be like sending somebody to a methadone clinic and never giving them any counseling or support. So I just have to wonder about that, and I'm kind of skeptical, I think. But
I had two questions. The first question is, when law enforcement administers the Narcan and they revive a person, what happens to that person? Because I thought I heard earlier that they could be back out using again in a matter of hours.
yeah, they sure can. They're deep in their addiction. With the Good Samaritan law, you can't force them to go to the hospital. You can't force them to go to rehab. Part of the concern is if you do force them and hold that over their head and say you're going to prosecute if they don't, then people are going to stop calling for help when somebody's overdosing. We know it's not a perfect bill. We hear law enforcement's frustration with it, which I'm sure Detective Schaefer could tell you about. But maybe there needs to be some sort of onus. We agree, but the legislators are listening to law enforcement's concerns as well as EMS's concerns about that. And it's voiced everywhere we go. We hear it all the time. But, you got to remember you're dealing with a disease. You cannot force somebody to go into rehab. If you force them, they're going to sign themselves out AMA in a matter of minutes or hours. And that's what they do all the time. They are not throwing their arms around law enforcement and thanking them for saving their lives because they have no concept in their brain that they almost just died. Their brain is so affected by this drug.
And you got to remember, when they hit the Narcan, they're just coming out a really, really good high. So they're not happy. And it just wiped that high out. But when the Narcan came out, and I heard from a lot of even police officers and other people in the public about enabling, I think Smoke even talked about this a little bit earlier. But what I tell everybody and what I think about myself is, what if it was your kid? If I had to give my own kid, if my own kid had a heroin problem or a pill problem, I had to give him Narcan 100 times or 150 times for him to live. Think about it being your kid. And I know for sure the people that I've talked to that their kids have passed away from heroin, they wish they had Narcan.
They testified in a courtroom that if a phone call had been made and the paramedics showed up, that Danny could have lived. And the law wasn't there. They just didn't make the phone call. They left him. But the Narcan could have saved him, and we just didn't have it.
And as Claude always says, you can't cure dead. You can hopefully, eventually convince somebody to get help. And it might take 20 times. Some of these individuals I've talked to have been in and out of rehab 20 times or more before finally it clicked. It takes a long time to replace those triggers that give them that high from heroin, replace them with something else that means something in their lives. And you got to remember, a lot of them have broken lives to begin with. They have holes in their lives, all kinds of things going on. And they use that drug to sort of give them that dopamine high that they can't get from their broken life. And so you got to fix the broken life most of the time before you can fix that addiction. So.
One more quick question is, I grew up in Chicago, and I was talking to my mother the other day, and she was saying that I was telling her about our problem here with heroin, and she's saying it's the same way in Chicago. And I was just wondering, around the country, are there any best practices? Is anybody doing anything that's working?
Well, that's an excellent question, because why reinvent the wheel? And so we did a lot of research, and what we found was there's oddly enough, it's a county located in North Carolina? Yeah. North Carolina. And for some reason, this county was able to get their overdose death rate down by like 60%. And so we researched it, and we discovered that they actually created a nonprofit called Project Lazarus, where they are recreating their best practices that then can be adapted for different communities. And so we reached out to them, and Project Lazarus, they came up and they met with the Heroin Task Force and provided a presentation. And we are right now in talks with them to come back and help adapt what we're doing here in York County to the model that worked for them in North Carolina. And so that's already been done. And again, that's called Project Lazarus. And I would recommend anyone go to their website, just Google Project Lazarus. I mean, you'll see, and then write your legislators and say, hey, Project Lazarus is fantastic. Let's get some money for this.
One other thing I want to talk about real briefly is in New England, as well as in Philadelphia now, actually. The law enforcement is, and also in the state of Washington, by the way, law enforcement is actually working with these addicts and taking them directly to rehab if they want, instead of arresting them. I know that's a novel new approach, and some people think maybe that's not the right approach, but actually it's working, and it's a lot more cost effective, a lot less expensive, and so they are actually, instead of arresting them, they're giving them the chance to go to rehab. There was a great special on 2 weeks ago on Frontline. I would encourage you to Google it. It was part 1. I haven't seen part 2 yet, but amazing at what they're doing in Washington State. And Philadelphia has just implemented it. I just found out yesterday. And then another thing that we're looking at in York, and I will kind of semi-announce it right now, is a form of harm reduction that has been used successfully in Philadelphia, Lancaster, Harrisburg, Reading, and York is probably going to come on board with this soon. And I know for some people it might sound a little controversial, but it's a syringe exchange program. It does not increase usage. That's a misconception. It makes it safer for law enforcement out in the streets. They don't have dirty needles they're coming across. It decreases HIV and Hep C rates drastically. And in Philadelphia alone, last year, the people that work those syringe exchange programs actually counsel the addicts. They're former addicts themselves. They befriend them. They trust them. They counseled and got 1,000 people into treatment as a result of that program. And that is something that we are seriously considering here in York. Like I said, it's been done in Lancaster, Reading, Harrisburg, Philly, and it's been quite successful. It decreases the HIV Hep C rates in the county drastically by injection, and at the same time, hopefully gets people into treatment over time, because you know what? Law enforcement or me coming up to an addict and trying to talk him into treatment does nothing compared to a former addict who they know and understands their life. And so it's quite effective, and there's no data to support that it increases heroin usage. Heroin addicts do not sit around, potential heroin addicts do not sit around saying, I'm gonna wait till they get clean needles, then I'm gonna start using. That's not their mentality.
One thing I can tell you that is not going to work, and I can tell you the guys that I work with are some of the best drug detectives ever seen. The one guy in particular is unbelievable. I can tell you I'm pretty good at being a father. I think I'm pretty good at turkey hunting. But I can tell you that I am going to fail, and the New York City Narcotics Unit will fail with arresting all the heroin dealers. It's not going to happen. We work every day. I am so excited to sleep into 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, I can't even tell you. I'm so excited. Our weeks are generally 4 or 5 in the morning to 8, 9 o'clock every night. We arrested a lot of drug dealers. I love arresting drug dealers. I love putting them away for a long time. Love doing it. Love getting guns off the street. Love getting drugs off the street. We are not going to solve the problem. And it's going to be education, awareness. The people in the crowd here, I met with a bunch of preachers the other week with Lieutenant Fells. It's going to be those people. It's not going to be us. We do not have the answers. We're not going to be the answers. We will be out there doing what we do, and we will be trying to get as much drugs off the street and make as much awareness as we can, but we're not going to solve the problem.
I know there's some more questions out there, but we're going to get you out of here on time. I want to thank you all for being here. Just one more thing. If you would just help me acknowledge the gal up here in the box there that did the sound. She ran the slides for us. So thank you very much. Remember your evaluations, fill them out, set them on the table. Take your trash with you. Again, thank you to our speakers, Detective Andy Schaefer, Coroner Pam Gay, Ms. Charlene Scaletta, Attorney Dave Sunday, Claude Smoke Staley from the Coroner's Office. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you guys. When you get back to your offices, tell your bosses thank you for allowing you to come today. Have a great day. Get home safe.